Welcome back to the Enchanted Library. I'm so glad you've stopped in today. Here's what's waiting for you this week. A few fascinating moments from history, a fun day you might want to celebrate, a poem pulled from our shelves, and a simple idea to take with you into the world around you. Let's begin. This week in history, a few remarkable things happened. On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was adopted. It was a moment when a group of people chose to set out on a new path, declaring their independence and beginning something very uncertain, but very important. The document itself is made up of words, carefully chosen and thoughtfully written, but those words represented something so much larger. They reflected ideas about freedom, responsibility, and the possibility of building something new. I encourage you to find a copy of the Declaration of Independence and either read it for yourself or have someone read it to you. What stands out to you about this document? Are there parts that you've heard before? On July 1st, 1840, the first postage stamp, the penny black, was issued in Great Britain. Before that, sending mail worked differently, and it wasn't always simple or consistent. The introduction of a small prepaid stamp made communication easier and more reliable. A small object, just a piece of paper, but it helped connect people across distances. On June 30th, 1859, French acrobat Charles Blondin crossed Niagara Falls on a tightrope. He walked across a rope stretched high above rushing water, carefully, steadily, step by step. It was not just about balance. It was about focus, his patience, and his trust in every movement he was making. Moments like that remind us how much can be accomplished when someone is willing to try something difficult and stay steady while doing it. And finally, on July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart disappeared during her attempt to fly around the world. She was one of the first female aviators to achieve international recognition, and she challenged expectations about what women could do. Her story is remembered not just for the mystery of her final flight, but for the courage she showed in pursuing something few had done before. Like we said, July 4th is the day of the Declaration of Independence. We call it Independence Day here in the United States. It's often marked by gatherings, celebrations, parades, and time spent together with friends and family. You might notice fireworks, flags, or traditions that repeat year after year. What traditions do you and your family have for this holiday? This week also brings something a little bit more playful. Build a Fort Day. If you'd like, you might try to build a small fort using blankets, pillows, chairs, or anything you have nearby. It doesn't have to be perfect. It could be indoors or outdoors, maybe under a table, or maybe a big cardboard box. Sometimes building something simple can turn into its own kind of adventure. Now, let's pull something off the shelf to read. Today's poem is Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. If you'd like to read this poem later, you can find it on the Poetry Foundation website. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere on the 18th of April in 75. Hardly a man is now alive who remembers that famous day and year. He said to his friend, if the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. 1 if by land, and 2 if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country folk to be up and to arm. Then he said good night, and with muffled oar silently rowed to the Charlestown shore, just as the moon rose over the bay, where swinging wide at her moorings lay the Somerset, British man of war, a phantom ship with every mast and spar across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile, his friend, through alley and street, wanders and watches with eager ears, till in the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms and the tramp of feet, and the measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boats on the shore. Then he climbed the tower of the Old North Church by the wooden stairs with stealthy tread to the belfry chamber overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch on the somber rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of shade, by the trembling ladder steep and tall, to the highest window in the wall, where he paused to listen and look down, a moment on the roofs of the town, and moonlight flowing over all. Beneath in the churchyard lay the dead, in their night encampment on the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still that he could hear, like a sentinel's tread, the watchful night wind as it went creeping along from tent to tent, and seeming to whisper, "All is well." A moment only he feels the spell of the place and the hour and the secret dread of the lonely belfry and the dead. For suddenly all his thoughts are bent on a shadowy something far away, where the river widens to meet the bay, a line of black that bends and floats on the rising tide like a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now gazed at the landscape far and near, then, impetuous, stamped the earth, and turned and tightened his saddle girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of the Old North Church, as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still. And lo, as he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer, then a gleam of light. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but lingers and gazes, till full on his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. A hurry of hoofs in a village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles in passing a spark, struck out by a steed flying fearless and fleet. That was all, and yet through the gloom and the light the fate of a nation was riding that night. And the spark struck out by that steed in his flight kindled the land into flame with its heat. He has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him, tranquil and broad and deep, is the mystic, meeting the ocean tides, and under the alders that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, is heard the tramp of his steed as he rides. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Medford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog that rises after the sun goes down. It was 1 by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. He saw the gilded weathercock swim in the moonlight as he passed, and the meeting-house windows, blank and bare, gaze at him with a spectral glare, as if they already stood aghast at the bloody work they would look upon. It was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of the birds among the trees, and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadows brown. And one was safe and asleep in his bed, who at the bridge would be first to fall, who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. You know the rest. In the books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball, from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again, under the trees at the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in the darkness, a knock at the door, and a word that shall echo forevermore. For born on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. This week for our nature activity, try looking at the night sky. If you can, step outside after sunset, with a parent or with permission. But look up. What do you notice first? Are there stars? Is the sky completely dark, or does it still hold some light? If you stay outside for a few minutes, do you notice more? Sometimes the longer you look, the more your eyes adjust, the more appears. If you're with family, you could each point out something you see. A bright star, a shape, an airplane, even part of the sky that just feels a little different. Maybe you see the lights moving. That could be an airplane or a satellite or the International Space Station. If you can't go outside, you can still imagine it or watch a video. What do you think the night sky would look like where you are? Sometimes simply looking up is enough to remind us how much more there is beyond what we usually see. Well, that's what we've discovered this week. I'll be looking up at the night sky too, and we'll be looking at that same sky together. We'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform and share our podcast with a friend. Stay connected by following us on Facebook at facebook.com/Enchanted Library. If you'd like to support the work we do, you can visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/Enchanted Library. We appreciate your support. Until next time, friends, happy reading.